Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot into a mud-slicked medieval village, where the walls are made of wattle and daub. The roof leaks just enough to keep your bed damp, and the chickens have no sense of personal space. You're a peasant, your floor is dirt, your pillow is straw, and you woke up because a sheep farted in your face. Welcome to your day. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice when your eyes creak open, besides the soggy wool blanket and the overly affectionate chicken sitting on your chest, is the smell. It's rich, a fine cocktail of livestock, damp straw, unwashed feet, and something that might have once been cabbage. You're not sure. Your house is a single room, shared with your family, 2 goats, 3 chickens, and whatever's currently living in the thatch above. Spoiler: it's rats. The walls are made of woven twigs plastered with mud, known romantically as wattle and daub. And no, it doesn't keep out the wind, or the rain, or much of anything, really. But you make do. You always do. There's no glass in the window, just a wooden shutter. You open it and get a face full of freezing mist. Morning greetings from nature herself. Outside, the village stirs. Smoke drifts from neighboring roofs, which means someone's managed to start a fire. You mentally note which neighbor has kindling you'll probably need to borrow later. You stretch, if you can call it that, and hit your head on a ceiling beam for the 4th time this week. It's low and unforgiving, just like your landlord. The chickens flutter to the side in protest, as if you're the guest in their home. You kind of are. There's no privacy. Your entire family, parents, siblings, possibly a grandparent if they survived last winter, shares the same cramped space. You sleep on straw. If you're lucky, there's a thin linen sheet that's mostly holes. Blankets are wool, coarse enough to exfoliate, and probably damp because everything is. You step outside, your bare feet squishing into cold, muddy earth. Shoes? Please. Those are for festivals, or at least dry days. You haven't seen one of those since harvest. Your toes already hate you. The village itself is a patchwork of thatched cottages and livestock pens. Pigs squeal, sheep bleat, and someone is already yelling about stolen firewood. Again, the communal well waits in the center like a medieval water cooler. And yes, it's also a gossip hotspot. Here's your morning routine. Fetch water. Milk the goat, if it cooperates. Collect eggs, if the chicken doesn't peck your wrist raw. And try not to step in what the pig left behind. Breakfast is whatever's left from last night, likely stale bread and weak ale. You try not to think about it too much. You share your morning with the sights and sounds of hard life. A dog barks at a cart. 2 kids chase a stick like it's the highlight of their week. And someone's already praying loudly that the Lord's reeve doesn't come around today asking for labor. Now, about that Lord. Your village sits on his land, and everything you grow, make, or dig up is technically his, including your body if he needs it for work. This land is not yours. It never will be, but more on that in a bit. Right now, your stomach growls and your breath clouds the air. You check your tiny vegetable patch, nibbled by rabbits again. They're your greatest enemy. That in winter, and taxes, and plagues. Okay, it's a long list. Historians still argue whether early medieval peasants had moments of rest or joy during their day-to-day, or whether it was just one long blur of back-breaking monotony. Evidence from some manorial records suggests you might get holy days off, or time to celebrate, with watered-down ale and aggressive folk dancing. Luxury. You head to the common pasture to check on the cow. Well, not your cow. The village's cow, or technically, the Lord's cow, but it's your job to watch it today. You try not to get attached. Last winter, it was soup. You pass by old Gertrude, who's muttering something about fairies stealing her turnips again. Everyone nods solemnly, because honestly, it's not the weirdest thing that's happened. A few years ago, a fox got into the church and was declared possessed. These things happen. And here's a fun, or horrifying, fringe fact. Some medieval people believed the soul left the body during sleep and wandered around. So if you wake up feeling weird, you probably bumped into someone else's dream soul. Sleepwalking? Nope, just a spiritual collision. Eventually, you return to your hovel. Hands chapped, knees wet, and the sense that today will be long. You eat your breakfast slowly. A chunk of bread, a few spoonfuls of something bean-based, possibly a pebble. Everything tastes vaguely like smoke. Or goat. Sometimes both. You stare at the fire pit. It's out again. You'll need to trade something to get more wood. Or spend hours collecting twigs. You eye the broom handle. No, not yet. Your family begins to stir behind you. More coughing. Someone complains their straw mattress has fleas again. Someone else finds a beetle in their breakfast. It's probably extra protein. No one's picky. And this is your every morning. Cold, muddy, hungry, but alive. For now, you chew your breakfast slowly, savoring each gritty, chewy bite of yesterday's bread as if it might grow softer with concentration. It doesn't. It only reminds you that it's been 3 days since you had anything remotely fresh. But hey, at least the mold is mostly on the crust. Your meals are predictable. You wake up, eat bread, work, eat bread, sleep, dream of better bread. That's the rhythm. If you're particularly well off, which you are not, you might throw in a bit of cheese or onions. Meat? Only during festivals or funerals. Sometimes both. The staple of your peasant life is bread and ale. Not because you're a connoisseur of carb-forward cuisine, but because it's what your grains become, mostly rye or barley. With occasional traces of something unidentifiable, depending on which sack the miller grabbed. The bread is dense, hard, and vaguely brick-like. You could probably build a small cottage with enough loaves. Some are so coarse they're called black bread, though really, it's more of a deep, accusatory brown. Historians still argue whether the quality was that bad or if we're exaggerating modern revulsion. But your teeth know the truth. Then there's the ale. Yes, you drink beer with breakfast. Not for fun, but because the water is questionable at best, deadly at worst. Ale is weak, barely alcoholic, and brewed at home. It's cloudy, warm, and tastes like someone soaked stale oats in ditch water. But it won't kill you. Probably. Your midday meal is called dinner, a hearty term for another helping of bread. Maybe some bean or pea porridge. And a chunk of cheese if the cow's feeling generous. If your family is lucky enough to keep a garden, you might have cabbages or leeks. If not, nettles and weeds it is. Add some salt, call it stew, and hope no one gets food poisoning. Tonight's supper? Likely more bread, with maybe a dribble of pottage, a kind of slow-boiled slop made of grains and vegetables. It's been simmering for days, reused and replenished over and over. Imagine a soup with commitment issues. That's pottage. Now, here's a strange but true twist. Some wealthier households used trencher bread, thick slices of stale bread, as plates. Once soaked with food, these edible dishes were tossed to the dogs, the poor, or repurposed in the next stew. Waste not, want not. You, of course, just eat from a communal bowl. Less fancy, same flavor. Seasoning is limited, salt is valuable, spices are for the rich. And sugar? That's a mythical substance reserved for nobles and saints. You might stumble across mustard seeds, wild garlic, or if you're really daring, horseradish. It's your only kick in a meal that otherwise tastes like wet cardboard. Now and then, there's a miracle. Eggs. One of the chickens lays in a good mood, and suddenly breakfast becomes a celebration. You boil it, share it, argue over who gets the bigger half. It's a tense time. Families have been divided over yolks. Your fuel for work is determined by whatever was in the pot that day. A good day means a full belly and enough energy to haul a plow, mend a roof, or thresh grain without collapsing. A bad day means weakness, fatigue, and praying someone else does the heavy lifting. But not too loudly. The Lord's Reeve doesn't like slackers. Now here's something medieval diets had going for them. They were shockingly plant-based, high in fiber, and extremely low in sugar. Your gut may grumble, but your arteries are probably clean. Of course, your teeth are another story. Most peasants have dental records that read like crime scenes, ground down by grit in bread from stone-ground flour, or rotted from lack of hygiene. And yet, somehow, you carry on. You pass the fields and see others at work, chewing stalks of something or picking dirt from their teeth with tiny twigs. Meals are portable, taken when there's time. There's no lunch break, just bites between burdens. There's a moment, brief, golden, when a traveling peddler rolls into the village. He carries spices, raisins, dried fish, honey. It's like a farmer's market run by Merlin himself. You trade 3 eggs and a pair of socks for a tiny jar of something orange. You're not sure what it is, but it makes your soup taste like hope. Fun fact: medieval people often consumed more calories than modern humans. Especially during harvest, men could eat 3.500 to 5.000 calories daily. Mostly through bread and ale. It sounds indulgent, until you remember they burned all of its swinging tools. Hauling hay, and not dying, you settle in for the evening meal by the hearth, dipping a crust into the bubbling pot and trying to ignore the smoky flavor. It's not from the spices. It's from the soot that drips from your chimneyless roof into your dinner. You pretend it's pepper. The fire crackles softly, giving the room its only warmth and light. You eat slowly, surrounded by the soft hum of family, livestock, and wind leaking through the cracks. Your fingers are stained with onion, your lips dry, and your stomach not quite full. But it'll do. Outside, the sky darkens, and the stars begin their slow shimmer above your soggy little world. Somewhere down the road, a dog barks, someone laughs, and for just a moment, the bread doesn't taste so bad. You wipe your hands on your tunic, not that it's clean, and stand, already dreading the sound of the reeve's boots. Because today is Dues Day. Again, you don't own the land you till, the house you sleep in, or even the air you breathe without owing a bit of it to someone higher up the medieval food chain. That someone? Your local lord. He lives in the manor up the hill, the one with actual windows and, if rumors are true, a second floor. He doesn't farm. He doesn't sweat. He doesn't patch his own roof after a hailstorm or chase a chicken with ringworm. But he does collect rent, grain, eggs, sometimes your labor, occasionally all of the above. This morning, you're bringing him a basket of offerings. It's not much, some withered carrots, a bundle of herbs, and one suspiciously nervous chicken, but it's what you owe. Part of your feudal contract. You give. He, well, continues existing, in luxury. That's the deal. Feudalism, historians agree, was a complicated, multi-layered system of obligations. But for you, it's simple. The lord owns the land, and you work it in exchange for not being thrown off it. Or worse. Some historians debate whether it was always as grim as it sounds, whether lords ever showed kindness or shared in crises. There's some record of that, but you haven't seen it firsthand. You trudge up the path toward the manor, stepping carefully to avoid cow pies, old tools, and the village drunk who's once again asleep in a wheelbarrow. Birds chirp, sheep stare, and you practice your most submissive nod. Head slightly bowed, eye contact? Risky. The manor is stone, grand, and slightly smug-looking. You knock on the gate. A steward opens it with a face that says, "You're lucky I'm even looking at you." He inspects your basket with the enthusiasm of someone checking a questionable sandwich. The chicken squawks. The steward sighs. "That'll do." He grumbles, and you're waved away without a thank you or even a grunt. You walk back with empty hands and lighter spirits. One less thing to worry about, until next week. Because these dues come often and in many flavors. There's the Harriet, a kind of death tax paid when the head of a peasant family dies, typically the family's best animal. As if grief wasn't already heavy enough. Now your cow is part of the will. Then there's the tallage, a kind of random tax the lord imposes when he needs money. Which is, somehow, always, you think his new armor polish doesn't pay for itself? And of course, the corvée, days when you're required to work the Lord's own fields instead of your own. You might be plowing, harvesting, building walls, or, in one unforgettable year, hauling a statue of St. Michael 3 miles uphill for reasons never fully explained. You pass the church on your way back, and Father Bernard gives you a wave. He's friendly, if a little judgy about your irregular attendance. The church takes its cut. 1/10 of everything, straight to the heavens, or at least to the vestry. Historians still argue whether peasants ever truly saw the church as separate from their feudal burdens. Some believed deeply in salvation and charity. Others, not so much, especially when the priest's wine was better than the village's. You reach your field and pick up where you left off yesterday, pulling weeds, shooing birds, and trying not to think about what happens if the harvest fails. Spoiler. It's not a bailout. The field's soil is heavy clay. The kind that clings to your boots and dreams alike. You use a wooden plow pulled by your neighbor's ox. It groans louder than you do. You suspect it resents your existence. Your tools are few: a hoe, a spade, a sickle with a blade so dull it's basically a spoon. Sharpening costs metal. Metal costs money. And money is a rare beast in this economy. You glance up at the manor again. The Lord's banners flap in the wind. He has a falcon. You have a chicken who pecks your ankle when she's bored. You wonder, briefly, what it's like up there. Hot food, dry sheets, a bed that doesn't creak when you breathe. Books, maybe, real ones, not the occasional sermon scrap or drawing of a goose you saw once. Then again, lords have responsibilities too, like feasting, hunting, deciding who gets married to whom, maybe arranging a minor war. Heavy lies the crown and all that. But down here, the weight is physical. Your back aches, your fingers are cracked, your shoulders know the rhythm of labor like a lullaby. And it never ends. Still, you find small victories: a turnip ungnawed by mice, a cabbage that didn't wilt, the smile on your child's face when you hand them a tiny, shriveled apple. Life is measured in crumbs. But even crumbs can fill a moment. A passing monk stops at your field and asks for alms. You give him a bit of bread. He blesses you and moves on. Barefoot and beaming, you wonder if he's ever had to explain a missing chicken to a furious steward. The sun begins to dip, casting gold across the village. You gather your tools and head home. Tired but not broken. Not yet. Dinner will be simple. The manor will be lit with torches and laughter. But your hearth glows, too, and your stew simmers just enough to smell like comfort. You settle in with your family. You've paid your dues today. Literally. And you've earned your sleep. You wake up to shouting. Again. Turns out old man Gilbert's pig broke through the fence and is now enthusiastically rooting in your garden, chewing the last of your leeks like it's hosting its own private banquet. You grab a stick and charge outside. Barefoot, hair sticking up like a frightened hedgehog. The pig snorts. Unimpressed. You wave, yell, and finally manage to steer the beast back through the gap in the fence, though not before it leaves a generous, steaming gift in your cabbage patch. Charming. Village life, as you know it, is a delightful mix of communal chaos and shared complaints. You live elbow to elbow with neighbors, animals, and noises you've stopped trying to identify. It's a world without privacy. And frankly, without quiet. Your house isn't much of a fortress. The walls are thin, and everyone hears everything: your arguments, your snores, your stomach growling through the wall at midnight. Soundproofing is a luxury that exists about 800 years in the future. Children chase dogs. Dogs chase chickens. Chickens chase anything that looks remotely edible, including your toes. Everyone's always out and about, especially near the village center where people swap goods, gossip, and unsolicited opinions. Now, it's easy to romanticize this closeness. But remember, the man next door may be your cousin, your landlord's cousin, and your rival for the same plot of barley. Which means every interaction has the potential to be either heartwarming or aggressively passive-aggressive. Historians still debate whether medieval villagers lived in tight-knit harmony or thinly veiled hostility. You suspect it's both. One minute you're helping patch your neighbor's roof, the next, you're arguing about who stole the last usable bucket from the well. Still, life rolls on. You need each other. No one survives alone. Not here. You hear a bell ring from the chapel. A small group gathers in the square. Someone's lost a sheep again. You've seen this sheep. It always escapes. It might be smarter than most people here. You join the search, half-heartedly, mostly because it beats weeding. Along the way, you pass by the blacksmith, who's hammering something vaguely useful while yelling at his apprentice. There's a scent of scorched leather and hot iron. A comforting kind of clamor. Next door, the baker is already shouting about mice in the flour barrel. Again, you pass Martha, the healer, who's boiling something foul in a pot that smells like feet and sadness. You nod politely. She mutters something about your aura being too anxious. You agree. And here comes Edith, the village loudmouth, striding through the mud with news. Did you hear about John's second son? Cursed. Born with 6 toes and a squint. She grins like she made it happen herself. You nod again and make a mental note never to sneeze around Edith. She'll probably call it demonic. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some medieval villagers believed elves caused illnesses. If you woke up stiff, sore, or oddly bruised, It might be elf shot. The remedy? Bread dipped in ale and a protective charm. You've tried worse. You finally find the sheep stuck in the privy pit. It's not ideal, but you help lift it out with a stick and a prayer. And someone runs off to fetch a cleanish bucket of water. Life returns to normal. Well, normal for a Tuesday. You head to the river next. It's time to wash your clothes, your hands, and maybe your soul. The river serves as laundry zone, bathing spot, and, occasionally, source of disease. You scrub with a rag, your hands going red in the cold. A fish stares at you with judgment. You stare back. Someone upstream starts dumping pig slop into the water. You make eye contact. They shrug. You shrug back. It's the medieval version of, it is what it is. Your tunic flaps on a bush as you sit nearby, cooling your aching feet in the water. A group of kids runs past, shrieking with joy and flinging mud at each other. You half smile. Childhood here is short and dirty, but sometimes still full of laughter. You hear someone singing, a thin, reedy voice carrying a tune about love, loss, and apples. There's always someone singing. Stories pass this way. News, songs, legends about knights who once walked these muddy paths or dragons that probably just turned out to be bears. The sun reaches its peak. You return home, your laundry only slightly cleaner and fully covered in new smoke from someone's midday cookfire. The pig is back, casually eyeing your cabbage again. You sigh, pick up your stick, and resume your endless dance of man versus bacon. Later, you and your neighbors patch the fence together. You don't talk much, just pass nails, adjust stakes, mutter insults at the pig, but it's a kind of peace. Cooperation born from shared suffering, or shared cabbage loss. That night, you sit outside, back against your cottage, listening to the low hum of a village slowly winding down. Someone plays a whistle, a baby cries, an old man mumbles about spirits in the woods. You close your eyes for a moment and think about how strange it is, how something is broken, dirty, and smelly as this little village can still feel like home. The wind whips through the cracks in the cottage wall like it owns the place. You burrow deeper into your straw bed, wool blanket clutched around your shoulders. But it's no match for the cold. Winter has arrived, and it didn't knock. Outside, the ground is frozen. Your breath hangs in the air even indoors. A misty little reminder that warmth is optional and frostbite is always lurking. The hearth crackles weakly, more smoke than flame, because you're down to scraps of damp firewood, and no, the broomstick is still off limits. Probably. You sniff, smoke, cabbage, and something that may or may not be your left sock slowly turning to compost in the corner. Winter is not romantic. It's a months-long endurance test for your body, your pantry, and your patience with goats who think indoors is their birthright. In better years, you might have salted pork or smoked fish stored away. This year, a few onions, a bag of dried peas, and whatever root vegetables haven't turned into pickled sadness. You're already rationing, stretching meals, watering down stews, and cutting bread so thin it becomes more of a concept than an experience. And the boots. Let's talk about the boots. Yours have holes, not metaphorical ones, literal, wide-eyed, frost-welcoming holes. Your socks are rags. Your feet are purple. You try wrapping them in cloth, then in straw, then in prayer. None of it works particularly well. Historians still argue whether medieval winters were harsher due to the tail end of the so-called medieval warm period, or if the suffering simply feels worse because every record of it involves words like perished, starved, or froze stiff in the privy. You believe it. You wake every morning stiff and shivering. The animals stay inside more now, sharing your space, your heat, and your tolerance levels. The goat's breath is hot on your face. You no longer care. Outside, the village is quieter. The fields are barren. No plowing, no weeding, no harvesting, just survival. You mend tools indoors, spin wool, or help your neighbor patch a wall with mud that freezes before it sets. Productive? Not exactly. Necessary? Completely. You try to keep spirits up. You hum while spinning yarn, tell stories by the fire, and once hosted a beet boiling competition that ended in a minor argument and one case of tongue burn. It's fine. You all needed the distraction. Sometimes, there's a feast, a proper one. Maybe it's Christmas, or Saint Someone's Day, or you simply caught a hare too slow to run. The village gathers. Someone breaks out the good ale, meaning, slightly less bitter. And you eat until your stomach reminds you it's not used to real meals. Here's a fun, freezing tidbit. Some peasants used heated stones wrapped in cloth to warm their beds. You tried it once, forgot to wrap it, burned a hole in your only blanket. Lessons were learned, mostly about sadness. You pray more in winter. Everyone does. For warmth, food, mercy. You shuffle to the chapel, breath billowing like a tired dragon, and kneel beside neighbors with equally runny noses. Father Bernard tells you to be grateful for hardship. It makes spring sweeter. You contemplate throwing a turnip at him. You help the elderly when you can, fetching water, sharing firewood, delivering soup. The weak don't last long in winter, but you do your part. Community matters more than ever now. One pot of stew can feed 3 households. One log can keep a baby from freezing. One joke, if it lands, can lift a whole room for an hour. You even find yourself talking to the rats. Not in a creepy way. Just conversational. They're here, you're here, and at least they're warm. They blink at you with tiny, indifferent eyes. You envy them. The days are short, gray, and often indistinguishable. Morning arrives late, darkness falls early, and you measure time by meals and the slow melting of the icicle hanging from your roof beam. It looks like a dagger. You name it Harold. One particularly brutal night, you wake up to find your water bucket frozen solid. Indoors, you chip at it with a spoon until the handle snaps. Now it's an ice sculpture. You consider entering it in next year's non-existent winter fair. And then, finally, you spot the first green sprout outside your door. Just a weed, poking through frostbitten earth, but you stare at it like it's a prophecy. You call over your neighbor. You both agree it's probably just moss. Doesn't matter. You name it anyway. Because here's the thing. You survive. Somehow. Even when you're cold, hungry, tired, and dreaming of bread that doesn't break your teeth. Even when you wake to the sound of sleet on thatch and sigh because your only dry shirt is also your wet shirt. You've made it through. Again. The first coughs begin quietly. A neighbor's child wheezes during the night. Then the old widow 2 houses down starts spitting into rags she hides in her apron. You tell yourself it's just winter. The air is cold. The homes are damp. People get sick. But you know better. It spreads fast. One day it's a few villagers with feverish eyes and pale faces. The next, half the square is silent. Empty. Doors remain shut. The chapel bells ring more often now. You can't keep up with who's gone. The Black Death has arrived. And it doesn't care about your chores, your prayers, or your last batch of soup. You've heard the stories. Whispers from travelers. Monks who passed through last summer muttering about boils the size of apples, and death within days. You thought they were exaggerating. They weren't. It starts with a headache, then fever, then your lymph nodes swell, neck, armpits, groin, into painful, bulging lumps, buboes, they call them. Sounds cute, isn't? The village healer tries everything, rosemary smoke, onion poultices, vinegar-soaked cloths, even the bloodletting kit last used on a constipated donkey. Nothing helps. Some villagers wear garlic around their necks. Others hold lavender or pennyroyal to their faces. You just try not to breathe too deeply. Here's a bizarre tidbit. Some people carried small bundles of herbs or fragrant items called posies, you know. Ring around the rosy. That cute little rhyme? Probably based on this delightful chapter of history. And it's not just the sick you fear. It's the panic, the abandoning, the way families leave bodies in doorways and run, the way no one helps bury the dead unless there's coin or coercion. Historians still debate whether the plague was bubonic, pneumonic, or some ungodly combo of both. Pneumonic spreads through the air, which would explain how quickly entire households vanish in days. No matter the form, the result is the same: silence. You stop going to the market. The well is suspiciously quiet. People avoid each other like the plague. You cover your face with cloth soaked in vinegar, because someone said that might help. It smells worse than the goat, but you wear it anyway. The Lord, gone, took his family and a cartload of cheese and left. No farewell, just a locked manor and rumors of safety in the next shire. You laugh bitterly and return to stirring your broth of despair and weeds. Still, you try to keep a rhythm. Wake, cook, feed the animals, check the sick, pray, bury the dead, rinse and repeat. If you're lucky, the day ends with everyone in your home still breathing. And you do what people do when everything falls apart. You invent reasons. Some say it's God's punishment. Others blame the Jews, which leads to violence in cities you've only heard of. Still others point at comets, cats, or the north wind. Honestly, it might be the rats. But who knows? A friar comes through one morning, barefoot, wild-eyed, and shouting Latin prayers. He says whipping himself brings God's forgiveness. Then he vomits in your yard and collapses. You bury him by sunset. Your dreams grow strange. You dream of dancing skeletons, of blackened skies, of your own hands crumbling to dust. You wake up screaming one night, only to find the dog licking your face. A comfort, if a slightly slobbery one. The plague doesn't care if you're kind, or clean, or careful. It just moves through doorways, on carts, in breath. You light candles, draw crosses in chalk, avoid eye contact. Sometimes you cry without reason. Other times you laugh when someone drops a pot. Your youngest sister gets sick. She clutches your hand, her skin burning, eyes wild with fever. You stay by her side, whispering stories about saints and magical apples and the cow that once wore a hat. She laughs once, then goes quiet. You bury her at the edge of the forest, where the ground is softer and the birds still sing. No priest, no hymns, just a stone and your tears. Then you go home and scrub your hands raw. There's a strange, hollow rhythm to grief. You still have chores. The goats need milking. The fire needs feeding. Grief has no place in a world that still expects you to survive. And then, one day, the coughing stops. The doors stay shut, but now because there's no one inside. A breeze carries through the village with no one to whisper to. The healer sits outside her hut, staring at her empty hands. No herbs left, no people to give them to. And still, the sun rises. You go outside and breathe deep, long, defiant. You survived. You don't know how. You're not even sure why. But you did. The plague is not gone. Just paused. But so are you. You sit by the hearth that night, eating something warm, petting a rat you've decided is now a friend. And you listen to the silence. Not out of fear, just out of memory. The village is quieter now. Fewer voices, fewer footsteps, fewer chickens, although the ones that survived seem louder and smugger. But you're still here, and so is your cough. Just a tickle, probably from smoke, probably. You wake up to the smell of something sharp and strange wafting in from next door. Turns out Martha the healer is back to boiling mysterious things in her cauldron. She waves at you over the fence with a ladle in one hand and a dead beetle in the other. You smile weakly and decide not to ask what's for breakfast. When you're sick, or just not quite right, Martha is your first stop. Not because she's licensed, that's not a thing, but because she knows things. Which weeds to chew when your stomach rebels. Which moss to boil when your joints ache. And which corner of the yard you should scream into when the night terrors won't let you sleep. Medicine in your world is part herb lore, part prayer, and part hope. You've chewed bark, swallowed garlic, smeared mud on burns, and even tried that frog on the chest trick once. It didn't work, but it did make the frog very angry. Most remedies come from plants, yarrow for wounds, nettles for circulation, mint for headaches. You know where to gather them in the woods, but you don't always remember which ones not to mix. You learned that lesson the hard way the day you accidentally made a laxative stew. Your whole family still talks about it. And when the herbs fail, there's always prayer. You kneel at the chapel again, lighting candles, crossing yourself, and asking for mercy, usually in the form of functioning lungs. Father Bernard assures you that divine healing is real, especially if you tithe properly. You smile and give him half a turnip. It's all you've got. Divine budget cuts. Here's something you overheard once. Some noble up north is hiring barbers to cut open people's veins when they're ill, bloodletting. They call it, supposed to balance your humors. You wonder if bleeding out into a basin really balances anything besides your dignity. Historians still argue whether medieval healers were truly wise women, or just lucky guessers with decent recipes. Either way, you're grateful for Martha, even if she sometimes talks to her chickens like they're her apprentices. You remember the last time you had a fever. Martha made you drink a brew of boiled fennel, honey, and something bitter you couldn't identify. Then she laid a damp cloth across your forehead and whispered something about moon cycles. It tasted awful. You got better. Coincidence? Who cares? It worked. There are other cures floating around. Some folks swear by sleeping with iron scissors under the bed to ward off demons. Others hang bags of crushed bones over their doors. You tried the scissors once. It kept the dog away. At least, there's always a spiritual component. Illness, you're told, can come from sin, or spirits, or breathing too deeply near a toad. You've done all three, so really, it's anyone's guess. You see the traveling bone setter pass through town. He sets broken limbs using cloth, sticks, and the occasional terrifying crack. You flinch just watching, but he leaves behind fewer limps than you'd expect. So you grudgingly trust him. Mostly. Your friend Tom hurt his back stacking hay. Martha rubbed it with warm goose fat and sang a chant under her breath. He healed. He also now swears he can predict the weather through his kneecap. Not exactly helpful, but impressive. And for the truly strange cases, there's the old woman by the marsh. Nobody agrees on her name. Some say she's 90. Others say she's been 90 for 100 years. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, it's in riddles and frog noises. Once, she cured a toothache by whispering into the sufferer's mouth and then throwing a rock into a pond. It worked. You're too scared to ask why. Probably best not to know. Still, there are limits. Sometimes you do everything right, the herbs, the prayers, the goose fat, and people still die. You sit beside their beds and hold their hands, whispering words you're not sure you believe. You cry, you carry on, but sometimes, they live. And when they do, it feels like magic, like defying the world, like shaking your fist at death and saying, "Not today, you absolute jerk." And isn't that healing too? Hope, even in a world with no antibiotics or antiseptic or even reliable bandages. Just community, stubbornness, and whatever's growing in the yard. You go to bed that night with a belly full of nettle tea. A sprig of thyme tucked under your pillow, for dreams, Martha says, and a cautious feeling in your chest that maybe, just maybe, you'll feel better in the morning. You do. The leaves have long since dropped. The ground is hard as stone. And the sky has that hungry gray look again. You're out by the cold root cellar, scraping together what's left of your stores. A couple of shriveled carrots, one onion, and something that might once have been a parsnip, or possibly a petrified rat. You squint at it, shrug, and toss it into the, maybe stew, pile. You're hungry, not just the missed breakfast kind. This is deeper, bone deep, the kind of hunger that makes you stare at tree bark and wonder, what if? Because the harvest failed. Again, the barley was stunted, the peas barely flowered, and the cabbages bolted early. What little did grow was devoured by blight, beetles, or Jeffrey's escaped pig, who now waddles through the village looking deeply satisfied. You plot its downfall daily. There's no food left to trade, no grain to grind, the mill wheel sits motionless, and the granary echoes when you step inside. That's never a good sign. Historians still debate whether medieval famines were primarily caused by poor weather, mismanagement, or good old-fashioned terrible luck. You vote all of the above. One year it was too dry, then too wet, then the hailstorm, then that bizarre summer when the sun just didn't. You remember the great famine stories, back when people chewed leather, bark, and in one horrifying tale, boiled their belts into soup. You once bit your shoe just to test the theory. It was deeply unsatisfying and smelled like regret. You manage a thin stew with some beans, a bit of lard, and water that's been boiled enough to not kill you. You add a pinch of salt and whisper encouragement to the pot. It doesn't listen, but it's all you've got. You share your meager meal with your family. Everyone takes small sips, careful not to ask for seconds. The baby gets the soft vegetables. You chew the broth. Somehow, Martha the healer passes by with her basket. She gives you a handful of dried dandelion roots and something that might be squirrel jerky. For strength, she says. You thank her like it's a feast. Here's a fringe fact. In some places during famine, people ate clay mixed with flour. You read that right, literal dirt pie. Rich in minerals, awful in every other way. You tried a clod once. It tasted like despair and rocks. But hunger isn't just about food. It's what it does to people. How they shrink into themselves. How arguments flare quicker. How neighbors grow wary. You see it in the way Edith clutches her bread. In the way children stop playing and start digging for roots. Yet, even now, there are moments of absurdity. Someone finds a stash of dried fish in a wall. The village rejoices, then discovers it's rancid. The village mourns, then cooks it anyway. Desperation, after all, is a seasoning. You hear rumors from the next village over. People eating dogs, cats, worse. You pretend you didn't hear. You pet your goat with extra tenderness. Father Bernard leads a prayer for rain. Or sun. Or anything. Really. His sermons have become vague lately. You think he's just as confused as everyone else. He talks about divine testing. You wonder if the test has an answer key. You try bartering. A clay jug for a bag of oats. A knitted scarf for a spoon of honey. It's never enough. Currency now is calories. And you're bankrupt. The worst part isn't your own hunger. It's watching others. A child with hollow cheeks. An elder who won't touch their own bowl until everyone else eats. That kind of quiet sacrifice that doesn't make a sound, but weighs more than any debt. One night, there's a theft. Someone breaks into the baker's hut and steals the flour scrapings. It's barely enough for one flatbread. No one confesses. No one blames. You all just look at each other and move on. Hunger changes the rules. But even here, in this bleakest stretch, there's strange resilience. Someone starts baking nettle bread. Another brews a soup from lichen and bark that doesn't taste entirely terrible. You find yourself chewing more slowly, savoring even the blandest broth like it's a king's feast. A traveling monk visits, handing out dried apples and verses about suffering. You take both. The apples are gone in seconds. The verses linger longer. And when, finally, a thaw begins, and you dig into the earth to find a single, stubborn potato, it feels like treasure. Like a sign, you clean it gently, roast it over the fire, and divide it into 6 careful pieces. You eat in silence, eyes closed, savoring each bite like it's sacred. Because maybe it is. The chapel bell tolls again, slow, steady, and always just a little too solemn. You know the rhythm now. Not for danger, not for celebration. This one's for tithes. The church is calling, and your soul doesn't get a day off. You put on your best tunic, not that it's much different from your worst, and make your way down the muddy path to the village chapel. It's the one stone building that doesn't leak, mostly, and it smells vaguely of incense and wet wool. Inside, you kneel beside your neighbors on rough wooden benches. Father Bernard stands at the front, draped in modest robes and trying to look more serene than sleep-deprived. He begins the Latin chants, which you mouth along with, not because you understand the words, but because you've heard them every week since you could walk. The service is long, slow, and dimly lit. You shift uncomfortably on the cold bench and try to ignore the hole in your sock. The baby behind you is crying. The old man to your left has dozed off, and the incense burns your nose just enough to make you contemplate sneezing directly into your sleeve and pretending it was divine intervention. The church looms large in your life, not just spiritually, structurally. It's everywhere. Blessings, births, marriages, funerals, harvests, storms, and illnesses all pass through its doors. You tithe your crops, your time, and your hope. 1/10 of everything you own belongs to God, or, more precisely, to the church. And Father Bernard? He's not just the priest. He's the scribe, the teacher, on good days, the moral compass, on most days, and the designated explainer of all disasters. Whether it's a fire, famine, or the sheep giving birth to something with 2 tails, he's expected to find the holy reason for it. Historians still argue how deeply peasants internalized religious doctrine versus simply performing it out of routine or fear. You suspect it's a mix. You definitely fear hell. You definitely enjoy the songs. And some days, you think maybe Saint Brigid is looking out for your goat. On the wall hangs a wooden carving of Christ, eyes gentle, arms outstretched. You stare at it when your thoughts wander, especially when Bernard's sermon turns into a lecture about moral failings. Usually lust or ale, sometimes both. After the service, there's confession. You wait your turn behind a boy who's nervously sweating through his shirt. He probably stole turnips again. When it's your time, you kneel, whisper your wrongs, like skipping prayer last week or fantasizing about throwing your boot at Edith, and Bernard murmurs his forgiveness. You feel lighter, briefly. Then it's tithe time. You drop a small sack of grain into the chest. It's a painful gift, but you give it anyway. Not just for salvation, for habit, for the vague, flickering hope that being good will mean your roof stops leaking. You step outside into the gray. greeted by a gust of wind and a pig that may or may not be judging your moral failings. You tip your head to it respectfully. Religion isn't just Sunday service. It's stitched into every part of your life. The calendar follows saints' days, fasts, and feasts. You cross yourself before meals, say blessings over your bread, and whisper tiny prayers while walking past cemeteries, just in case. Here's your quirky detail. During major holy days, people sometimes dressed up as biblical figures in village plays. You once played the angel Gabriel, mostly because you fit into the only pair of feathered wings available. You tripped on stage. The Virgin Mary laughed. The church also tracks your sins. Too much dancing? Sin. Swearing at your neighbor? Sin. Thinking impure thoughts about the baker's apprentice? You guessed it. Big sin. You keep a mental list. It's long. And yet, despite the judgment and endless kneeling, there's comfort in the rituals. The chanting, the candles, the shared silence when someone says a name of the recently dead. The smell of beeswax and damp stone. It wraps around you like a threadbare blanket, scratching a little, but warm all the same. When things go wrong, and let's face it, they usually do, the church is where people gather. To weep, to plead, to light candles and hope someone up there is actually listening. You've seen miracles claimed here. A woman healed of her limp. A cow that stopped dying. A rainstorm that arrived just in time. And sometimes you think, what if? What if there's a heaven with dry beds and soft bread? With warm goats and firewood that never smokes too much? What if the saints walk beside you? Invisible but grinning. When you manage not to burn your porridge, that thought gets you through a lot. Back home, you reheat your stew, say your mealtime blessing, and pass the bowl around. The kids are already snoring before the sun sets. You watch the sky darken, then glance back at the little cross hanging over your hearth. You're not sure what it all means, but you keep praying, just in case. Before the sun has even finished rising, you're already outside. The frost bites your fingers through the threadbare gloves, but you don't have time to notice. Your legs move automatically, your back already tensing in anticipation. Because today, like every day, is work. And it never ends. You start by feeding the animals. The goat kicks over the water bucket. The pig tries to chew your boot. And the chicken lays an egg directly onto your lap. A small miracle, promptly ruined by the goat headbutting you in celebration. Then it's off to the fields. You grab your hoe and trudge down the same path you've walked since you were old enough to walk. Mud sucks at your boots. Your breath fogs in the air. Somewhere, a rooster crows 3 hours too late. Your tasks depend on the season. In spring, you plow and sow seeds. Summer means weeding and tending. Autumn is the mad rush of harvest. Winter, repairs, mending, and trying not to freeze while chopping firewood with a blade so dull it might legally qualify as a spoon. Today, you're digging up weeds and muttering curses in the general direction of the soil. Your back aches, your hands are blistered, and you haven't even hit mid-morning yet. Someone nearby is already singing to keep spirits up. It's off-key, but heartfelt. You pause to stretch and glance around. The whole village is out. Tom is hammering something near the fence. Agnes is scolding her ox. Martha is attempting to coax herbs out of a patch of dirt that still looks dead from last frost. Everyone is working, always, because in your world, the moment you stop, things fall apart, tools rust, crops die, food runs out, so you press on. You take your lunch crouched beneath a tree, a hunk of bread, a bit of onion, and a swallow of watery ale. It's not much, but it's yours, and it gives you just enough strength to get back to hoeing, harvesting, or hauling stones for someone's collapsing wall. Historians still debate the average number of working hours for medieval peasants. Some argue peasants had more free time than modern workers, thanks to feast days and seasonal rhythms. Others say, sure, you had time off, if you didn't mind starving that week. Truth is, your schedule doesn't come with a planner. It comes with the weather. A bad storm, and you spend all day rebuilding. A surprise frost, and you scramble to save what's left of the greens. There's no weekend. There's before chores and after chores. And sometimes more chores. You help your neighbor today, because their roof collapsed last night. The thatch was too old, and the snow too heavy. You climb up with a bundle of reeds and start weaving. The wind howls. You nearly fall twice. The second time, you catch yourself with your shovel and swear loudly in Latin. You're only 2 words of it. You learned them from Father Bernard. Who uses them during sermon prep? Mid-afternoon comes and goes. You haul water, feed livestock again, patch the fence that broke, retrieve a runaway goose. Then it's time to fetch firewood, what's left of it. The trees near the village have been thinned to twigs. So now you hike into the woods with a dull hatchet and a prayer. You bring back an armload. It's not enough. It never is. Back home, your family is tending to indoor work. Your sister is spinning wool. Your mother mending clothes. Your younger brother carving new pegs for the gate that always falls off when someone sneezes near it. You sit beside the hearth, arms trembling, and take up your task, repairing tools. Your knife is chipped. Your rake is missing teeth. You fix what you can. For everything else, there's rope, or hope. And here's your quirky fact for the day. In some villages, peasants rotated tasks weekly, meaning you might be the haymaker one week and the pig minder the next. You once had pig duty for a month. It left emotional scars and one missing boot. You think of the noble's life again. You imagine them sipping wine, writing letters, riding horses through fields they've never tilled. You scoff, then cough, then remember you have to get up early tomorrow to patch the barn roof. Evening sets in. You wash your hands in cold water, wiping off mud, blood, and some mystery gunk that's probably animal related. Then you eat dinner, stew again, thin and smoky, and talk softly with your family. Stories help. They distract you from the ache in your joints and the calluses splitting at the corners. By candlelight, you finish the day's mending. Your eyes strain, your shoulders slump, and when you finally lie down, it's not on a soft bed, but a sack of straw that smells vaguely of goat. But here's the thing, you rest. Because despite the aches, despite the monotony and the mess, your body has earned its sleep. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. And somehow, you'll find the strength to keep going. You wake up scratching. Again, your shirt clings to your back. Your legs are wrapped in a blanket that may or may not be shared with a mouse. And there's a tickle in your nose from the coarse wool near your face. Morning greetings, courtesy of medieval fashion. You rise with a groan and reach for your tunic, a shapeless, knee-length thing the exact color of old porridge. It smells like wood smoke, sweat, and yesterday's soup, because you've worn it for 5 days straight. Or is it 6? Honestly, time is flexible when the laundry routine is, shake it out and hope. Your clothes are made mostly of wool. Scratchy, heavy, damp-loving wool, perfect for trapping warmth, and also everything else. Dirt, fleas, and half of last week's stew seem permanently embedded in the weave. You slip into your leggings, wool again, naturally, then fasten your belt, which holds up your pouch, your knife, and your sense of purpose. Footwear? You glance at your shoes, which are less boots and more leather suggestions. One is tied with twine. The other has a hole your toe peeks through like it's saying hi. Clothing isn't about fashion, it's about survival. You need layers for winter, something breathable for summer, and enough durability to handle a daily wrestling match with pigs, mud, and the occasional angry goose. Historians still argue whether peasants had Sunday best outfits set aside for church. You do. Technically, it's just your Monday through Saturday outfit with a slightly less tragic neckline. Your undergarments? A linen shift. If you're lucky. If you're really lucky. It doesn't have a patch in an embarrassing spot. Washing them involves a lot of cold water, beating on stones, and pretending you didn't just flash the baker's son again. Today you're adding a cloak. Not a dramatic, flowing one like a noble's. Yours is short, ragged, and smells like mildew, but it keeps the wind off your shoulders. And the clasp you made from an old nail and a button is your finest bit of engineering. You head outside and immediately regret not wearing a second pair of socks. Those socks, in your case, are just wool tubes with dreams of becoming mittens. You pass the neighbor's kids playing with a stick and a hoop. One of them is wearing a tunic that clearly used to belong to someone 3 feet taller. It drags like a train, and the child wears it with the poise of royalty. That's the thing. Everyone's clothes are hand-me-downs of hand-me-downs. When something tears, you patch it. When it's too small, you give it to someone shorter. When it's too far gone, you turn it into rags. And when the rags give up, they become chicken bedding, the circle of life. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, peasants dyed their clothes using plants, woad for blue, madder for red. You tried that once. Your tunic turned greenish. The village called it marsh puke. You wore it proudly. You arrive at the workshop where your sister is spinning yarn. Her fingertips are calloused, and there's a line of fluff in her hair. She shows you the new socks she's knitting. Well, sock. The other one's still a theory. You thank her like she just handed you gold. You trade a few items today, an extra scarf for some goat milk. A repaired glove for a wedge of cheese. Textiles have power, not in style, but in warmth, in survival. One good cloak can mean the difference between frostbite and a tolerable winter. And yet, clothes don't protect you from everything. You're still cold. You're still wet by midday from the knees down. And your tunic, bless its tired seams, now has a mysterious tear you don't remember earning. Probably the pig again. You spend part of the afternoon re-dyeing fabric in a tub behind the house. It involves boiling water, leaves, and patience. Your hands stained blue. Your mother laughs and calls you Saint Indigo. You decide you like the title. Sometimes there's a feast or festival where people really dress up. You once saw a neighbor wear shoes with both soles intact. The sheer audacity of it. You still talk about it. You think about what nobles wear: velvet, silk, embroidery. You once caught a glimpse of the lady of the manor during Easter. Her gown sparkled. Your jaw dropped. Then you tripped into a puddle. She didn't notice, but the puddle did. Evening comes, and you undress by firelight. Your tunic smells of onions. Your socks have crusted over in spots. You hang them up, hoping they'll dry. They won't. You wrap yourself in a wool blanket. The same one that prickled you awake this morning. It's not soft. It never was. But it's yours. You tug it up to your chin and imagine silk. Just for a second. Then you sneeze and remember you're allergic to fancy things anyway. You're up before dawn again. This time for a very different reason. Your cousin Alice is getting married. And the entire village is buzzing like a beehive someone accidentally sat on. You slip into your tunic, freshly aired and only mildly goat-scented, and head outside. The air is still and pink with morning light. The chapel door is open. And already someone's stringing up dried flowers and stuffing rosemary under the pews. You'd forgotten how seriously people take weddings. Especially when there's bread promised at the end. Marriages in your world are rarely about romance. They're about land, livestock, and alliances, if the bride and groom actually like each other. It's considered a happy accident. In Alice's case, she's marrying a man with 3 goats and a decent roof. Everyone agrees she's done well. Your own parents have hinted at your future. The blacksmith's daughter, maybe, or that boy from 2 villages over with strong arms and a mysterious limp. You're still hoping to marry someone with both a sense of humor and all their teeth. Time will tell. Historians still argue how much say medieval peasants had in their marriage choices. In some regions, families arranged everything. In others, the couple had more agency, at least as long as the church approved and no one owed too many pigs. Speaking of the church, Father Bernard is practicing the ceremony again, mumbling the vows under his breath and pausing to cough at inconvenient intervals. He looks nervous. Last time he married someone, he mixed up the names and almost legally wed a sheep. The bride arrives mid-morning, surrounded by a flurry of relatives trying to fix her braid, adjust her veil, and wrestle a wildflower crown into submission. Alice looks radiant, or at least only mildly terrified. Her dress is linen, passed down through 3 generations and now held together by a miracle and 6 carefully placed pins. The groom, Robert, wears his best tunic, freshly patched and smelling faintly of barley. He's shaved, badly. There's a cut on his chin. He's beaming like a man who just inherited a cow and found out it's pregnant. You join the crowd filing into the chapel. It's packed. Everyone loves a wedding. The ceremony is short but heartfelt. Bernard's Latin wobbles, but the "I do" part comes through loud and clear. Rings are exchanged, twine wrapped in copper wire, and someone sneezes during the final blessing, which everyone takes as a good omen. Afterwards, the real celebration begins. Ale flows. Bread is passed around. Someone brings out cheese. Actual cheese. You nearly cry. You eat 3 slices before remembering your manners, or at least pretending to. There's dancing, of course. You're pulled into a circle of sweaty, laughing villagers stomping out rhythms while someone plays a reed flute that hits just the wrong frequency. It's perfect. You catch Alice and Robert sharing a quiet moment beside the well. He's holding her hand like it's the most precious thing in the world. She's smiling like she can't believe her luck. For a moment, You think maybe love is part of the equation after all. Later, stories are told, jokes are made, a toast is given by old Gertrude, who slurs through a poetic speech that may or may not have included a warning about bears. Everyone cheers. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some villages, it was customary to bed the couple by walking them to their marital bed as a group. You once participated in one. It was equal parts awkward and hilarious. Alice and Robert wisely opt out this time, disappearing quietly after the last dance. You sit by the fire as night falls, warm from the food and the company. The stars blink lazily overhead. You think about what marriage means in your world, not hearts and flowers, but partnership, survival, someone to share chores and laugh with when the pig gets into the root cellar again. You imagine your own wedding. Someday, you hope for bread, music, and someone who won't mind if you occasionally talk to chickens. Back home, your mother gives you a knowing look. He's a good match, she says, nodding toward a boy who just tripped over a bucket. You raise an eyebrow. He didn't fall into the bucket. She adds, a high bar. Truly. You go to bed that night full of bread, of laughter, of soft dreams about your future. Not a perfect future, but maybe, just maybe, a joyful one. The day begins like any other, mud, chores, the usual goat-related annoyance, until you hear the scream. High-pitched, sharp, and terrifyingly close. You drop your bucket and run. The miller's boy is kneeling beside his father, who's doubled over and clutching his chest. People gather quickly. Martha arrives with her herbs. But it's no use. Within minutes, he's gone. Just like that. Death in your village isn't rare. But it's always personal, always heavy, and rarely quiet. Later that day, you learn another neighbor slipped while climbing to the loft and broke his neck. Last week, a woman died giving birth. And last month, the boy from 2 cottages over never came back from the forest. You helped search. You never found him. You know how fragile everything is. You live it. Historians still debate medieval life expectancy. Some say 30 to 40 years. Others argue it was skewed by infant mortality. You don't need the numbers. You've seen enough to know, if you make it past childhood. You keep dodging death every season like it's playing a particularly aggressive game of hide and seek. You've seen people die of things that wouldn't scare anyone now, fevers, bad teeth, an unlucky fall from a cart, toothaches swell to infections, cuts rot. You once knew a man who died after stepping on a thorn. There's no doctor, no surgery, no painkillers. When something goes wrong, you rely on luck, Martha's potions, and your own resilience. Mostly luck. Today, someone's burying a child. Tomorrow, it might be you. You walk past the chapel and hear the bell toll again. It tolls so often now you barely flinch. Father Bernard prepares the burial rites, while a group of villagers dig in the churchyard. The ground is cold, hard-packed. They use pickaxes and heavy shovels. It takes hours. And when the hole is ready, the body is lowered in, wrapped in linen. A sprig of rosemary at the chest. There are no coffins here. Just earth, prayer, and silence. You find yourself thinking about your own body. How it survived so far. The aches in your back. The cough that never quite goes away. You wonder what'll get you in the end. The cold? An angry ox? One of Martha's more ambitious concoctions? Still, you live, and death becomes background noise. Not because it stops mattering, but because it never stops happening. Here's your quirky and unsettling tidbit. Some people believed that if you died with your eyes open, your soul could escape more easily. Others insisted you had to be buried with a coin in your mouth to pay the ferryman. You're pretty sure the baker's kid swallowed his. Then there are those tales, passed around quietly, about revenants. Restless dead who come back, mostly due to improper burials or unfinished business. Edith once accused her second husband of haunting her. He probably just didn't like her cooking. Childbirth, of course, is one of the most dangerous moments. You've watched friends disappear behind a curtain of groans and prayer, only for one to return. Sometimes neither. Midwives do what they can, but there's only so much a poultice and a whispered charm can handle. You know this, you fear this, and still, people marry, love, and risk it, because life doesn't pause for fear. You keep going. One night, Tom trips and cuts his hand on a side. It's deep. Martha cleans it and binds it tightly. You all wait. For days. Watching. Sniffing. wondering if it'll fester. It doesn't. He heals. You celebrate by giving him the last piece of dried fruit in the house. He cries a little. You don't mention it. Some deaths are quiet, others come with screaming. All are final. And yet, somehow, you don't collapse under the weight of it. The community holds you. Rituals keep the sorrow from floating too high. Bread is still baked. Songs are still sung. Children still giggle when someone falls in mud. Life insists on happening. You help with burials. You dig. You carry. You lower. You cry. Sometimes you don't. Not because you're cold, but because you're tired. Grief needs rest too. Tonight, you sit by the fire, thinking about the lives that ended this year. You whisper their names, one by one. Not all, just the ones that mattered most. And then you pull your blanket up, stare at the flickering shadows, and remind yourself that you're still breathing, still here, and that, somehow, is enough. Morning again, same thatched roof, same crusty bread, same goat chewing on something it definitely shouldn't. And yet, somehow, this day feels different. Maybe it's the sun. It's warmer today, just slightly. Enough to bring a faint whiff of grass in the breeze. Enough to make the mud a little less clingy and the sky a little less like wet wool. You stretch, bones cracking like dried twigs, and start your usual routine, feeding animals, fetching water, patching something that never seems to stay patched. But your steps feel lighter. Not because life has gotten easier, but because you've survived another day, another season, another storm. You look around the village and see the same worn faces. But behind them, resilience. The widow who still kneads dough with aching fingers. The boy who lost a brother to the plague but now dances like no one told him the world hurts. Martha with her basket of questionable teas and unshakable confidence in beetle-based poultices. The Lord still owns your land. The taxes still come. The pigs still escape. But you do your work. You tend your plot. You laugh when Tom trips over his own feet again. You help rebuild the fence after a storm. You hold a crying neighbor. You share your last onion. Historians sometimes wonder what kept peasants going. Was it faith? Obligation? Fear? Maybe. But you know the real answer. It's habit. It's hope. It's the stubborn belief that spring will come. That the goat will eventually learn not to eat your boots. That one day your back might not hurt quite so much. And it's the little things. The warm stew that actually has flavor. The quiet moment before sleep when no one's coughing. The rare evening when the sky turns lavender and the clouds forget how to loom. Even a joke, terrible and overused, can be salvation. Like the one about the miller's wife, the chicken, and the bishop. You start telling it during supper and your brother nearly chokes on his bread laughing. It's a good night. Later, you sit outside. The air is cool, but not cruel. The stars blink like they're trying to remember your name. The chapel bell is quiet. No one died today. That's rare. That's worth noting. You feel the straw mat beneath you. Rough but familiar. Your blanket itches. Your muscles throb, but your eyes close with a quiet kind of peace. Tomorrow, it begins again. Mud, toil, aching bones. But tonight, you rest. The air grows still as the village settles into its quiet rhythm. The distant echo of a dog's bark swallowed by the night. The fire crackles softly beside you. Its glow flickering across rough walls and worn hands now resting gently in your lap. You breathe in, deep, slow. The scent of wood smoke and dry earth fills your nose. You exhale. The weight of the day lifts. Just slightly, as the world shrinks to this warm, dim corner of your life. Outside, the stars whisper their old lullabies. The moon, fat and golden, hangs low over the thatched rooftops. In the distance, someone's lullaby fades into soft humming. You think you recognize the tune, though you don't remember where you learned it. Maybe your mother, maybe someone long gone. Your body, sore but proud, begins to sink. Straw rustles beneath you, a faint creak in the beams above. The goat shifts in the corner, grumbling into her sleep. Even she's exhausted. You think of everything you've endured, plagues, hunger, cold, grief, and marvel, gently, at the fact that you are still here. You survived. You made it through the season, through the storm, through the dark. And tomorrow, you'll wake again, bake bread, mend fences, smile at a joke you've heard too many times, feed the chickens, maybe sing while you do it. Because life, even in its hardest, simplest form, keeps asking you to show up. And somehow, you do. The fire fades now, ember by ember. The wind quiets. The world softens. And you, finally, sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.